The first problem is definitely insufficient friction. When you move a bit farther back to loop, you feel like you don't know if you're looping or hitting. It feels like a bigger version of a forehand drive. This means your friction isn't enough. Not solid friction. After the ball comes to us, we can still keep up a fast rhythm with forehand drives. But when the opponent's ball is very fast and pressing, we can't keep up. There's no time to execute. We see others' movements look very smooth, but once our own swing is extended, we can't make it in time. When I learned to loop, I could rally continuously but couldn't tell loop from hit. It probably took me about half a year. Then from looping, in matches I used loop on every ball without hitting. Because after learning to hit once in rallies, it was easy to get used to hitting. Hard to consciously loop. This transition took me more than a year. Even 2 years. I remember when I was young, playing provincial tournaments. I was still relying on forehand drives, seldom used looping. If your loop can't create rhythm or friction, then pure hitting may actually be better. Because when you hit it over, the quality of the ball can sometimes be higher than looping. So don't get discouraged, thinking you've trained for years but still can't loop well. You've practiced drives for years, but can't use them in matches. Don't lose heart. It may take another year or more to fully transition between looping and hitting. And you must remember, the threat of looping is truly greater than the stability and threat of hitting. I recommend everyone must learn the topspin loop. The topspin loop technique is still very mature. Now about looping. Why do we often have this confusion between looping and hitting? When transitioning from forehand drive to forehand loop, it requires a relatively significant adjustment. So the problems we encounter, the first is stance. Let's look at the body position. For forehand drives, the stance is close to the table. That means I need to stand nearer. But if we want to learn forehand loop, first you need to be clear about your stance. That is mid-close or mid-distance. To be honest, the range isn't that big. But at least you must ensure you are at mid-close distance from the table, at least about 1 meter away. So you have space. If you stand too close, I've seen many players, in videos they sent me, stand too close and can't move back. This makes it impossible to perform the stroke because of the speed. Since your movement is bigger, you get jammed. So to transition from drive to loop, your stance must be farther back. The second issue is the stroke framework. Let's look at the forehand drive. It is above the table. The backswing is an action above the table. But for the forehand loop, the backswing and body movement are below the table. If you compare them side by side, when I stand a little forward, you'll see the backswing is below the table. Because looping creates a parabolic motion, while hitting is more of an impact motion. So the frameworks of the two kind strokes are very different. Never think that a magnified forehand hit equals a forehand loop. The main movement in a forehand hit is completed by the forearm, using the forearm's impact after the ball comes. But for looping, you need braking from the upper arm, an outward arc from the forearm, and friction from the fingers and wrist, along with the rotation of the waist and hips. In contrast, a forehand hit involves fewer controllable elements. That's why looping is harder. But the more difficult the technique, the harder it is for the opponent to return. If you think it's simple, then it's also simple for your opponent to handle. My opponent finds it easy to return. I practiced the hook serve for 2 years, so the opponents struggled to return, so you must learn more difficult techniques to pose real threats to your opponent. So when we loop, our backswing should be at thigh level. But many players pull the backswing too far behind. Even though it's a topspin stroke, you still need to lower your stance. Keep the arc low and start from your rear right side. Then drive forward with power. In this looping motion, the upper arm participates, the forearm, the fingers and wrist. Even the shoulder follows the motion, pulling back together and driving forward together. Let's look from the side. That's not the case with hitting. In hitting, the upper arm doesn't engage, the shoulder doesn't engage. When you backswing, the movement framework is small and tight. But looping is more extended and relaxed. The level of arm involvement is very different from hitting. In hitting, the stance is flat and level. In looping, there must be some weight transfer. You push forward from your rear right side. The third point is about the amplitude of movement. For forehand hits, you can only stand close to the table. But for forehand loops, you must step back. If you stand too close while looping, or too far while hitting, your movement structure becomes unreasonable. So when you step back, your movement framework gives you more time to execute the loop. When looping, always remember to press on your weight, then push forward. At the same time, your backswing should be at your side, not going past your back. No matter how you rotate, it should not go behind your body. But when looping, your hand often ends up behind your body. Whether I rotate or not, it still ends up behind. So we shouldn't clamp the upper arm. Like this. You must release the upper arm. Remember, when looping, your backswing should be behind your body's side. Although my eyes are facing forward, my backswing is actually behind my body. It's taken from the back of my legs and waist. Many players might feel at this stage, will I be too late? Let me explain something. The reason you're late is not because of the motion itself, but because your recovery is too slow. After your first stroke, your recovery to the next ball is too slow. So when the opponent returns, you easily get jammed. The second reason is the opponent's speed. If the ball comes very fast, I won't rotate my body. Normally, my loop looks like this. But when the pace is fast, I use a shorter stroke and quicker tempo. When the pace is slower, I just follow my usual looping technique. That works fine. So it really comes down to these 2 points. Not every ball requires a textbook body rotation and full loop motion. It depends on the incoming ball. That determines the stroke I use. For example, when the opponent plays slow, I can fully extend. When they're a bit faster, very fast, then slower again. Then faster, slower, faster, faster, slower. All of these actions I just did still belong to the topspin stroke.